Zeitoun by Dave Eggers. Part 1. Friday, August 26th, 2005. On moonless nights, the men and boys of Jabla, a dusty fishing town on the coast of Syria, would gather their lanterns and set out in their quietest boats. 5 or 6 small craft, 2 or 3 fishermen in each. A mile out, they would arrange the boats in a circle in the Black Sea, drop their nets, and holding their lanterns over the water, they would approximate the moon. The fish, sardines, would begin gathering soon after, a slow mass of silver rising from below. The fish were attracted to plankton, and the plankton were attracted to the light. They would begin to circle, a chain linked loosely, and over the next hour their numbers would grow. The black gaps between silver links would close until the fishermen could see below a solid mass of silver spinning. Abdul Rahman Zeitoun was only 13 when he began fishing for sardines this way, a method called lampara, borrowed from the Italians. He had waited years to join the men and teenagers on the night boats, and he'd spent those years asking questions. Why only on moonless nights? Because, his brother Ahmad said, on moon-filled nights the plankton would be visible everywhere, spread out all over the sea, and the sardines could see and eat the glowing organisms with ease. But without a moon, the men could make their own, and could bring the sardines to the surface in stunning concentrations. You have to see it, Ahmad told his little brother. You've never seen anything like this. And when Abdul Rahman first witnessed the sardines circling in the black, he could not believe the sight. The beauty of the undulating silver orb below the white and gold lantern light. He said nothing, and the other fishermen were careful to be quiet too, paddling without motors, lest they scare away the catch. They would whisper over the sea, telling jokes and talking about women and girls as they watched the fish rise and spin beneath them. A few hours later, once the sardines were ready, tens of thousands of them glistening in the refracted light, the fishermen would cinch the net and haul them in. 34 years later, and thousands of miles west, Abdul Rahman Zeitoun was in bed on a Friday morning, slowly leaving the moonless Jabla night, a tattered memory of it caught in a morning dream. He was in his home in New Orleans, and beside him he could hear his wife Kathy breathing, her exhalations not unlike the shushing of water against the hull of a wooden boat. Otherwise, the house was silent. He knew it was near 6 o'clock, and the peace would not last. The morning light usually woke the kids once it reached their second-story windows. One of the 4 would open his or her eyes, and from there the movements were brisk, the house quickly growing loud. With one child awake, it was impossible to keep the other 3 in bed. Kathy woke to a thump upstairs, coming from one of the kids' rooms. She listened closely, praying silently for rest. Each morning there was a delicate period between 6 and 6:30 when there was a chance, however remote, that they could steal another 10 or 15 minutes of sleep. But now there was another thump, and the dog barked, and another thump followed. What was happening in this house? Kathy looked at her husband. He was staring at the ceiling. The day had roared to life. The phone began ringing, today as always, before their feet hit the floor. Kathy and Zeitoun, most people called him by his last name because they couldn't pronounce his first, ran a company, Zeitoun A Painting Contractor, LLC. And every day their crews, their clients, everyone with a phone and their number seemed to think that once the clock struck 6:30, it was appropriate to call. And they called. Usually there were so many calls at the stroke of 6:30 that the overlap would send half of them straight to voicemail. Kathy took the first one from a client across town while Zeitoun shuffled into the shower. Fridays were always busy, but this one promised madness given the rough weather on the way. There had been rumblings all week about a tropical storm crossing the Florida Keys, a chance it might head north. Though this kind of possibility presented itself every August and didn't raise eyebrows for most, Kathy and Zeitoun's more cautious clients and friends often made preparations. Throughout the morning, the callers would want to know if Zeitoun could board up their windows and doors, if he would be clearing his equipment off their property before the winds came. Workers would want to know if they'd be expected to come in that day or next. Kathy and Zeitoun had been married for 11 years. Zeitoun had come to New Orleans in 1994 by way of Houston and Baton Rouge and a half-dozen other American cities he'd explored as a young man. Kathy had grown up in Baton Rouge and was used to the hurricane routine, the litany of preparations, the waiting and watching, the power outages, the candles and flashlights and buckets catching rain. There seemed to be a half-dozen named storms every August, and they were rarely worth the trouble. This one, named Katrina, would be no different. Our next reader is Linda Wells.